All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for another edition of Just Reasoning Live, the show where we are here to amplify your voice, amplify the voice of the Caribbean community, the Black community, and talk about issues of relevance to our community. As for those of you who watch the show, in the past, we generally keep it pretty lighthearted. We touch on real issues, but for the most part, we try and keep it as lighthearted as possible. The format is just having, real conversations about real issues and have some fun while we're doing it. Tonight's show is a little different because we are coming to you at a time of tragedy. As a friend of our community, a good friend of a couple of my guests tonight, Kristi Payne was tragically murdered last week by an ex-boyfriend. So we want to touch the issue of domestic violence. It's something that plagues our community in many different ways. And in wanting to honor Kristi's memory and not letting her tragic passing be in vain, as much as people love and miss her, we want her life to have an impact long after she's gone. So that's why we're here. We want to talk about the issue generally. So joining me tonight, I'll have everyone introduce themselves. I'm Chris C-Dub, a couple of our returning champions. We have Jasmine, who just logged off some kind of way. We have Tex. And then we have a couple friends of Kristi's, Roger and Yvonne. And then we have Latasha Jackson McDougall, who is an expert in this field. And so I'll allow her to tell her story. So before we get to speaking about domestic violence in general, I wanted, Kristi's friends to say something about her, because, a lot of people will be watching this who have never met Kristi, never heard of her. So if you can kind of introduce us to this wonderful soul that was tragically taken, to put it in context. These aren't the statistics and numbers. These are real people, real lives, real mothers, real daughters. So if you can just kind of speak on her a little, and we'll take the conversation from there.
Okay, well, Kristi, I'm Roger, and nice to meet everybody out there. Kristi was a great person, man. She was a shining light and a pillar in our community. She was an above avid sports fan. She loved sports. She loved music. She loved to smile. I can't think of her without a smile. She was also an amazing mother. She was, man. There's not a picture that you don't see that beautiful smile. The crazy part about Kristi, she was friendly. Like, she was the most friendliest person. Like, everybody that met her, she's the most friendliest, happy person ever. But you just never know what goes on behind in people's doors or closets in neighborhoods nowadays. Like, you just never know. But yeah, she was like something else. I'd say she loved sports. She loved the Texans. Mm-hmm. She loved the Houston Rockets. She loved the Astros. One of her callings, she wanted to be a commentator on ESPN. That was her goal. So she would always do sports podcasts, and her alter ego was KP. Kristi Payne, and she would always put out her podcast, and she was good at it. And like statistics, she can sit there and she can go at it with any. Like, I remember when we dated, like, I would be cooking and she would always watch the game. I'd be like, dang, like, can we do
little role reversal.
Role reversal. Yeah.
And I would always be like, man, can we do this together so we can watch the game at the same time? But she loved sports. So So that's my memories of Kristi.
Yvonne?
So Kristi and I, we met through Roger. Roger's like my big brother. We've been friends for a long time, like 25 plus years plus. And so Kristi to me was not just a friend, she was a sister. right? An extra sister that I had. We had a pretty tight-knit group of queens. I call my girls queens. And we formed a real strong bond. And this hits home for two reasons. I met her right around the time that I lost my brother. And she was there for me. When I say there for me, she was there for me in so many ways. Even in those moments when everyone's quiet, you know, when everyone's gone, she was there, you know. Over time, we've shared laughs, taquitos, number sevens con queso from Whataburger, laughs, cries, fun times. But one thing about her is the first thing you'll notice is her beauty, how beautiful she was. Beautiful on the inside and the outside. And she had a very humble spirit. No matter what, she was always humble. It was never about this or that or being arrogant, or she was always down to earth and always was there for you. When you go to her page, or if you see things about her, you'll notice one consistent thing. She always made you feel like you were the most important person in that room. She was always down for you. If there was something you were trying to do, something to get off the ground, even like this podcast, if it was a podcast, if it was, for instance, what we started in my brother's honor was Make a Mark Foundation. And it was a foundation we started to be in the community and make our mark in the community, do different community service activities and raise money for different organizations. And she was one of the founding members. And she always had different ideas and different things we could do, and was always there, on time, ready to go, on time, ready to go. And so when I think about her, you know, over the years, you know, life changed, life happens. We got a little distant, but at the end of the day, she was always my sister. And so as we think about individuals that have either succumbed to this or are survivors of dealing with domestic violence, because I think as this conversation goes on, we're going to find that this is more than just Kristi's story. This is a lot of people's story. May you have been a direct victim or unfortunate to be what I would call in so many in collateral damage.
Your audio went out there, Yvonne.
All of this, because at the end of the day, everyone gets conversation. Yeah, it will impact everybody in a positive way. My internet.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to start that way because we're going to talk a lot, just, you know, which is probably going to be at a high level and numbers and statistics and that sort of thing. But as I said, this was a real person who had real relationships, real friendships. And, you know, to make this conversation the most beneficial, we wanted to have an expert in the field to discuss these issues. So we have Latasha Jackson McDougall, who, you know, turned her pain into purpose. And if, you know, so Latasha, if you can just give a little bit about your background and your story. And yeah, so if you can do that to set the table, that'll be helpful.
So I'm the founder of Cheryl's Voice. Cheryl was my mother. Unfortunately, I witnessed my father kill my mother and then kill himself when I was a kid. So fast forward to, you know, being orphaned, dealing with childhood trauma, which back in the 80s, that wasn't even a word. Nobody was talking about, you know, trauma counseling or anything like that. So I was raised with my grandparents, which thank God, you know, I had a praying grandmother and granddad who guided me through life. But all in all, I still struggled with, you know, fear of being in an abusive relationship, fear of, you know, even seeing someone with a handgun, just all these different things that tormented me through my years of school. It wasn't until I made it to college where I said, okay, I need to deal with this trauma. I need to deal with this stuff. So I started going to therapy. I did a full investigation to discover that my mother did everything she could to try to protect me and her in that situation. And unfortunately, law enforcement and prosecution office failed her. And so that's where I funneled my anger. And so I immediately, in grad school, I wrote a thesis on pretty much attacking things that need to be done in Tarrant County. And I'm proud to say that, you know, we made big changes when it comes to Tarrant County as far as domestic violence with a lot of the suggestions that I made. My entire life, it was revolved around approaching domestic violence in a holistic manner. So with Tarrant County, I have a position where I'm working with first-time offenders of domestic violence, holding them accountable, getting them to not have any more victims and not repeat offend. So, and with Charles Voice, I'm a national speaker, sharing my story about childhood trauma and how domestic violence affects children and our entire community, and signs of abuse, and talking about how women, need to be careful in dating situations and the importance of that, and sharing all that information and bringing it back around to showing the importance of children getting those resources and how we can be an impact in our community, because domestic violence is really hurting our Black community and people don't really talk about it until it happens to them, unfortunately. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that you saw I guess something on social media to even invite me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was doing domestic violence is not something that I know much about. Didn't see it growing up. Don't it's just not something I'm very familiar with. So I had to, I kind of had to step back and do a little research to just see how prevalent is the problem. You hear about it, and then you hear about these occasional murders or sometimes murder suicides. And to just put some numbers around it, just some stuff that I came across, said that nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. 1 in 3 women. So I may say I don't know any women. I just don't know that they're being abused, but I know a lot of women. So chances are that many of them are dealing with this. 1 in 4 men. Yeah. And as far as how Kristi was tragically killed, said 72% of all murder suicides, even though this wasn't a murder suicide, it was just a murder, involves an intimate partner, and 94% of the victims are women. And so it is, it's much more prevalent in our society than I even thought could have been possible. And so Latasha, just to bring the conversation to you, that tragedy that you experienced, and turn that into a purpose. I came across another stat that says 1 in 15 children are exposed to domestic violence, and they're in a house where it takes place, and 90% of them have actually seen it. And obviously, we know that it has to have an impact on a child.
Yes.
So, in your case, how would you say that it impacted you being in a home where domestic violence is taking place? And generally speaking, if you take it beyond you, how does it impact children in general?
Okay. I want to highlight the fact that, or kind of take away the myth that a lot of even women who are victims in situations, they feel like if their child is like under the age of 5, they're in the room sleep, or they're not paying attention, or they're not affected. And the reality is, the moment the woman is pregnant with child, her child is affected by domestic violence. If she's and domestic violence is just not physical abuse. If it's an emotionally abusive situation to where, you're constantly being talked down to and those types of things. I mean, think about it. When a woman is pregnant, we tell them to listen to classical music and be calm and do all these wonderful things so she can have a healthy baby. So imagine a woman in a situation where she's pregnant with child and it's just constant walking on eggshells, where the whole relationship is just not healthy environment. It's affecting that child. And the reality is, the younger the child is, the more of an impact, which sounds odd, but it's harder for them to be more resilient. So, prime example, I know someone who was like 4 months old and they lost their mother and father due to a homicide suicide, and they are just fast forward to being grown. They refuse help. They see, and it's a guy. He refused help. He sees he's constantly abusive. He's been arrested multiple times. And it's just, you're like, wow, he was just 4 months old when, this occurred. How is this possible? And that is a prime example how it's possible. For me personally, I've dealt with just health issues. I have brittle bones. I have to take an extreme amount of like vitamin D just because of the childhood trauma. I struggle with just not sure about relationships. It took me a long time. It took a lot of therapy for sure to even feel comfortable about just jumping into a relationship with somebody. And I still have a lot of parameters. I do background checks, all of these things, because I feel like, one, I am a speaker. People know my story, and a lot of abusers, they seek out like the weak person. And so, and I've actually had that encounter when I have a speaking engagement. I end up giving full story and showing them these text messages from a guy that I met who actually sought me out. And he thought that, I was going to be the ultimate win for him. And so he didn't realize I was smarter than that. I had already background checked them and everything.
Oh, that's right.
At the path, but it happens. It happens all the time. And, we as women, and men are victims too, don't get me wrong, but women, the numbers are higher for women. We have to be careful when it comes to dating. We have to be, background checking these people, asking questions about their childhood, asking questions about, how they feel about domestic violence. I was in a dating group, and there was a group of guys that were posting a joke about, if my girl had posted, if she gets too many likes by this guy, I'm going to send her this meme. And it was a picture of O.J. Simpson on trial. And all these guys and girls thought it was funny. And I said, this is not funny and it's not okay, because if a woman is thinking it's funny, she's probably abusive too. Red flags all over this. And they said, oh, well, you're going to forever be single because you don't have a good sense of humor. And I'm like, no, what is funny about a man being on trial for murdering his wife? And so we have to take away the joke of domestic violence. And a lot of people are guilty of, posting things that, are supposed to be jokes. And, like in Tina Turner, people make those jokes, eat the cake anime. But the reality is, this is something serious, and it's not nothing to joke about. And we have to start taking a stand against that and dismantling the jokes about that kind of stuff. But it's happening all the time. People are shying away from it. People are making jokes about it. What's her name? Megan Thee Stallion. We may not agree with her type of music or whatever, but she had no reasons to get shot, and nobody in the community even defended her. They just kind of said, oh, she shouldn't have been with this guy. She shouldn't have been with him. He was a bad guy. And it's like, wait a minute, he shot her.
Bundy came back and made comments about it.
Yes, I saw that. Bumby, kudos to him. I like him.
And to piggyback, even during COVID right now, there's a lot of people that are in abusive relationships that are afraid to be at home, and their solitude was work, or their kids' solitude for kids is to get away from the house. And a lot of people we're not thinking about those people that have to be in that traumatizing environment. So after this thing is ended, there's going to be a lot of trauma and anger in the community that we don't even foresee coming because of, being stuck in the house from March until now with family members who are, either they're watching their mom being abused or watching dad being abused, or the kids are watching their brothers and sisters being molested. So there's a lot of trauma that's going to come out after this COVID thing.
Yeah, I saw
that there was a definite direct correlation to the pandemic and COVID with the increasing statistics of the DV, domestic violence, and how, like you said, that, the stay-home order exposed, and it continues to expose a lot of vulnerabilities in relationships, and of course with the pandemic, there's a lot of social, financial, economic stresses that create, depression and anger, and the stay-home order. The article also stated that, the pandemic also is associated with, alcoholism and abuse because of the circumstances that are prevalent during this time. So there is a jump, and it's not just United States, but also globally. You know, there was an increasing percentage in domestic violent calls in Argentina, in China, and so it's interesting that these conversations are not being had on a global scale, on a national scale, about, you know, domestic violence and suicide, mental health, all of these sorts of things.
Yeah. Jasmine, I think, I saw it, it's the same article, but one very similar to what you stated just now, to put some numbers behind it. I mean, they said because it was global, it said like 20 to 30% increase in domestic violence calls. And they said, generally speaking, the more time that families spend together, the more there's increase in domestic violence, whether it be Christmas holidays or summer holidays, or now with the pandemic, being at home pretty much all the time for months. There's just been a big increase in domestic violence calls. So it's like I said, it's a problem that has gotten worse during this time.
Right. You know, and I also want to highlight
one of the interesting things that Letitia, go ahead, Jasmine. We can hear you. Repeat.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying, you know, like you said, Roger, you know, people were relying on going to work as a form of escape, or being able to take a break from the kids or the wife, or these sort of outlets that now, because of the COVID and the pandemic, you know, everything has kind of been shut down. So, you know, you're stuck in the space with,
with your potential abuser.
Yes.
Well, and the reality is they feel like they're stuck, but almost all the shelters and organizations are still providing services and have a place. But again, I mean, yes, we have a spike in domestic violence, but even before COVID, it was really hard to get people to leave their abuser. That's just what happens. They stay and to have places to go. But I do want to one quick thing, because I want people, because there might be some people listening that don't know a lot about domestic violence. When you hear the word domestic violence, it is not just people that are in a relationship together. It could be a father and a son, or children. So intimate partner violence is only people that are in a relationship. And I want to point that out because some people get confused if they read an article or they see something that says intimate partner violence. What is that? That's domestic violence, but it's just intimate partner violence is intimate. So that's someone that's either in a relationship or married or some type of relationship together. And so domestic violence could actually cover anybody in the family household dynamic. So sometimes you may see something that's domestic violence and you read the article and you're like, well, it was, a brother killed his brother. Like, how's that domestic violence? Well, it is.
Right. We also forget about, go ahead, Yvonne.
I was just going to echo. Sorry, Reg. I was just going to echo some of the things that Jasmine and Latasha touched upon. One of the major things that we're seeing, even with this pandemic, is the fact that safe place of school, that safe place of work, that safe place of the gym, that safe place to even just to be able to go out is no longer there. And I think it's going to take the community. And when I say community, for those who know me, they understand when I say community, I mean your village, the people next door to you, your friends on the phone, to actually go out with your mask on and do a welfare check, if that's what you have to do. To backtrack to something that Latasha had mentioned, Latasha, is that several years ago, my background is nursing. So I've been a nurse for 21 years. And one of the things that we did over the past is, visiting shelters, donating things that were needed. And one of the things that struck me, and I never forgot, that one of the representatives from the women's shelter that we visited on that occasion, she said it takes a woman 5 times, at least 5 times to physically leave, right? Takes her 5 times to pack her bag and say, I'm leaving. Takes her another time, okay, I'm leaving. Okay, I'm leaving. Okay, I'm leaving, before she actually walks out the door and leaves. Not to mention the number of times she comes back. Mm-hmm. So to get the strength to be able to leave with your kids with maybe nothing but your toothbrush or nothing at all, and your child, or even without the child, to leave takes so much. And I think, as Latasha said, so many times people have the misconception that domestic violence is only between a man or a woman, or a man just abusing a woman, when so many times it's also women abusing men. And in same-sex partnerships, it can be man on man or woman on woman, and people don't want to address that. I think a lot of times too, in our community specifically, it's somewhat normalized. Like you mentioned with Megan Thee Stallion. Oh, well, she's in that type of lifestyle, or she's part of that particular culture, so that's normal. That's what's expected. You know what I'm saying? Right. So with that, I think it takes also a conscious effort for us to educate ourselves, as we're doing with this forum, Chris. This is awesome. And what we'll be doing with another forum is to educate everybody, because domestic violence, we can stop. I'm sure you'll have a question soon, but we can stop and say, oh, we don't know anybody that's ever been in an abusive relationship or have experienced domestic violence, when I myself can sit here and tell you I experienced it. That one little push, that one little, let me just stand in front of you and tell you who I am. Let me just tower over you. Some people would never think that is a form of aggression, and that too is domestic violence.
Also verbally.
And I think
verbally. Yeah, verbally. There's a lot of verbal abuse that people are, because I've had, ever since I posted Kristi, like, I've had a lot of people reach out, women and men, just women mostly, have told me they've been in relationships where they've been verbally abused. And we have to be cognizant to walk away. It's okay to walk away. That the very first moment of the raise of a hand, or walk away. Like, and if that energy is not right, you leave.
Right. And I think, like Yvonne said about the village. Oh, go ahead, Jasmine.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like Yvonne said about the village. I mean, we have to get away from this whole. It's not my business. It's everybody's business.
Latasha,
it affects
I have a
our
question
entire
for you.
community. So if we see something, say something. If somebody said, I know for me personally, people know, don't tell me that. I don't care if especially if they put their hands on you, but if they said something that was, abusive, I'm like, no, that don't sound too healthy. You need to refer them to a therapist. There's a lot of hurt men and women out there who can project their pains or their childhood trauma onto someone that they're supposedly love. And I'm pretty sure if everybody thinks about it, you probably heard a story where somebody was kind of venting to you about whoever they're talking to, and you're just like, man, that's crazy, and just go about your day. When we need to be telling them, you really need to talk to a counselor, or that's not good, that's not healthy. We need to keep those conversations going, and maybe people will get out of situations a lot quicker before it gets to something.
Yeah, Latasha, I have a question for you, and Roger and Yvonne, feel free to chime in. You stated that you come in contact with a lot of first-time offenders, and I wanted to know, in the people you've come across, is there anything that stands out about them, or any common denominator between any of them that you can think about, and what are the red flags we should actually look for? Because I know Roger said he had no clue. Yvonne, I think you said the same thing. So I just want the viewers to, get an understanding of, okay, right, what might be some character flaws or some personality traits that
one of the great question. Okay, great question. One of the common denominators with the first-time offenders is their childhood. They either witness mom or dad be abusive, or when you ask them how they witness, I always ask them, how did you witness your parents resolve conflict? Well, some of them will just flat out say the truth, like, oh, my dad was abusive or my mom was abusive. And some of them will try to sugarcoat and say, oh, well, we were in our room, but I'm an expert. I can tell when you're lying, So usually they've had some type of childhood trauma, whether it's witnessing abuse in the home, whether it's some type of sexual childhood trauma that's unresolved. So unresolved issues in their childhood or in their life is definitely a common denominator of someone that has been abusive. Also, some other things are just not knowing how to resolve issues, which still kind of goes back to the childhood trauma. So some key signs that people can look for, men and women both, because honestly, My women offenders, they're a lot harder to be accountable. I will say that a lot of my men, they will come in and be like, you know what, I screwed up. I always said I didn't want to be like my dad, and here I am, and what can I do to help
So
me?
it's a continuous cycle.
Right, and then they identify it, and they are serious about making those changes. They're serious about therapy, and they're really trying not to be like their father anymore. Versus our women, and see, women on the other hand feel like, well, he shouldn't have cheated, he shouldn't have lied. Why? Because society says it's okay for women to be abusive. Every time that you watch a reality show or something, and a woman is throwing something in a guy's face or hitting him or whatever, everybody's laughing. Everyone's making comments, that, oh, well, he cheated, blah, blah, blah. And we need to stop that, because men can be abused and men are being killed just as much. And so that's another issue that we have to tackle is stop glorifying women being abusive and verbally or physically abusive to men. So,
well, a partner thing that you said, you mentioned the ideal of therapy, and I know culturally for African Americans, although we share this, arguably we share some of the same mental health issues that our other constituents and other people of other nationalities have, and probably even more, because we deal with racism, we deal with classism and economic disparities and all these other stresses, divorce, marital, and all these things. But we are so reluctant to go and get psychotherapy. Right. And I've never really understood why it is such a difficult thing for African Americans to do, to get professional help. I don't know, maybe if we feel like we're getting judged for it, or it says something about our lack of faith, religion-wise. I don't know.
Well, think about it. People say, old school. What happens in our house stays in our house.
Exactly. I was just about to say that.
I mean, that's just really the reality of what it is. So we have to, as Black people, we're getting better with therapy. There are more Black therapists. I have a Black male therapist. I mean, when I speak, I say, the 3 C's: Christ, counseling, and coffee is what keeps me going. And that's just the truth, I constantly tell people they need to deal with their trauma. They have to go to counseling. I mean, there's no way around it. And we have to take away the shame in our Black community about counseling. Right. And pick someone that you're comfortable with. Me, I chose a Black man because at the time I was so angry at my father, and I feel sorry for my therapist, because I wanted to yell at a Black man, but he helped me get past the anger I had from my father. And so for another person, depending on what they're trying to unpack, a Black woman or a white woman or a Black, pick a therapist that is going to be somebody that you feel comfortable with and opening up with. Therapy is amazing. It's my best friend. But we have to get in the Black community, like you said, comfortable with doing that.
So
and I said that because I had mentioned, a friend of mine.
She'll be back.
Your internet.
What were you gonna say?
Hey, that internet bill. Jasmine, you okay? You went out there. So I was just kind of thinking, stepping back and thinking of why does domestic abuse happen, right? I know that's a broad question, and there are all kinds of different reasons. Is it more so an issue of anger and not knowing how to resolve conflict, or is it more so a matter of control and wanting to control someone? What would you say is the predominant reason why it happens?
The reality is there is no predominant reason.
Right.
I mean, there's so many different layers. Majority of it is it starts with kids. So kids repeat what they see. Mm-hmm. So if they're seeing negative conflict, arguing, cussing, fighting, in the home, then they're going to grow up, get boyfriend, girlfriend, get married, and do the same thing. And so what we're seeing is a cycle. So when I teach this, I show the wheel, the power and control wheel, is a cycle of abuse. And it just keeps going and going, generation after generation after generation, until someone steps in. Like with me, domestic violence ended with me after my mom. But see, prior to my mom and dad, it was, women after, in my family have been in abusive relationships.
But to even jump in, like it seems like it has to do with control too, because
Yes.
like from my experiences with people who are controlling, they're losing power, right? And when they start to lose power, they don't know how to stop. So the anger and rage builds up, it seems like, and then now it's okay. I'm losing control. I'm losing my whole life. Everything is falling down around me. So I got to gain back control.
Right. And someone that wants control, that's still a learned behavior.
Yeah, hurt people. Hurt people.
And so it's like, it really does start with our kiddos. We have to see what they're seeing, pay attention, what's going on in the household, because it just keeps perpetuating in our community. And so the reality is, I'm constantly saying, I want to end domestic violence, but the judge I work for, she said, Tasha, I know you want to end domestic violence, but the reality is, as long as there are two people in a relationship, more than likely there will be some type of domestic violence.
Yes. So, in your answer, I don't know if this is what you meant to say, but what I've gathered from it is that probably the dominant reason is cyclical behavior, right? So with that said, how do we break these cycles? And when do we start breaking these cycles? Is it from their children? Is it, after they become adults? When do we start, breaking these cycles? If that is like the dominant, one of the dominant reasons why. Right.
So we have to tackle all aspects. So that's one of the things I do with Show's Voice. I'm in the schools educating. I'm going into juvenile detention, which is a big one. Talking to the boys and the girls in juvenile detention about dealing with their childhood trauma, taking their counseling serious, breaking those cycles. Talking to parents that have kids about domestic violence, canvassing the community about domestic violence. It really just takes tackling it as holistically, because there's no one piece that we can do to be able to make an impact, if that makes sense. So it's like,
it makes plenty of sense. Yeah.
I have to go holistically with it, which is why I kind of work the way I work. I'm trying to, if one person, I always say that, I'm like, sometimes I feel defeated, especially lately. It's been a lot of homicides and suicides. I'm like, am I not doing enough? But then I get someone like you, Chris, who says, saw something I posted and sent me a message. And then right after that, I get several people telling me, I also teach a class at the university here. And, students that used to have my class said they used the resource I gave them. And I'm like, y'all paid attention? Stuff and figuring out how to keep that conversation going. And also changing the narrative. So when someone is telling us a story about some relationship they're in and it don't sound too nice or healthy, really lean in on them and say, hey, that don't sound right. A lot of times we just kind of walk away. It's not our business. If I see somebody at the store, yelling at somebody and grabbing them, and I'm calling the police anonymously, do not jump in, because, people do get crazy and you get hurt in the middle of that. But it's nothing wrong with you calling the police and making an anonymous report about what's going on. We have to be there for each other. Now, some people get frustrated with that because they say, well, she's gonna stay or he's gonna stay. So what's the point of me calling the police? I don't care. I feel at peace saying that I called. If they stay, they stay. But I called.
You did your part.
It's funny. I've seen people say like when they're in a relationship, they refer to people like this is mine. They're like, and I always like, if somebody tell me like you're mine, I'm like, man, we came into the world two different people. Like I was born on a different date. I didn't join you at the hill. You don't own me. And I noticed like people in those kind of like in the controlling relationships, they say you're mine, like mine.
Well,
when did you own my birth certificate?
That's one of my dating workshops, but it depends on how the context is. Because some people are not abusive at all, and they may use that verbiage just as a form of, love, I guess. But then, two, if the person is already showing different other signs that may be
What's the signs?
narcissistic or abusive, then yeah, that's a red flag. So I wouldn't necessarily say someone saying that, oh, you my bae or whatever is abusive. However, depending on other aspects. Of
but we're talking about in anger. I seen it posted on, I seen somebody post it on their Facebook, like almost like, when your mom would I brought you in this world, I'll take you out. It was almost in the same context
that's
of
definitely a red
your
flag.
mind, and that's not healthy. Like if somebody's telling you they own you, and no, it's not okay.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on telling people they should leave. All right. Obviously, when you think about it, there are very clear reasons why many people don't leave. Probably the predominant reason is fear, because you could be about to leave someone and they said, "No, you're not leaving me," and so you stay and take that abuse versus being killed. Right. We know that happens.
Finances too.
Yeah. So right. So there's
usually the biggest one.
There's that aspect, but to come at it from the other angle, for people who are watching, who may know someone who's not the victim, but is the abuser, either they know it for a fact or they suspect that someone they know, maybe a good friend. What would you recommend, that person do in order to intervene without, being too much in the business, but, you have to say or do something? What's your best recommendation there?
The easiest way to approach that without being, exposing yourself or trying to, get them out of something is two ways. One, familiarize yourself with local resources. So let's say if the person was here in Fort Worth, well, we have a place called Women's Center and One Safe Place. And, if I came across someone who was kind of telling me a story, or I felt like they may be in something that's not healthy, I would say, hey, have you ever heard of this place called the Women's Center? I really think you may want to talk to them. They may be helpful. You don't want to just come out and tell someone to leave because they get defensive. Especially if they really love this person and all these other things, and then they may even stop talking to you. So you want to just recommend, hey, I heard, and I always tell people they can use me all day. Like they can say, hey, I just heard this wonderful story about this woman organization named Cheryl's Voice. I have a video posted up. Hey, or you can send them the link and say, hey, have you seen this story? My gosh, it's an amazing story. And just for them listening, you kind of push it back on them, and they're clicking on the link and they're listening to my story and hearing what I went through. And from a child's perspective, if they got kids, they're going to start thinking about their own children. And that may be enough to get them to say, I might want to go to her website and get a resource.
But it's from, I'm speaking from the angle of knowing an abuser, not a victim.
So,
right?
Okay. So the abuser, and the person is abuser, same thing. You can find the local resources that are in the area. They are, it's called, so the class that I make our offenders go to is called Batters Intervention Prevention Program, also called BIP. Familiarize yourself or kind of Google it, resources for abusers in my area, and say, here's the idea. Have you ever thought about, dealing with, but I'm gonna be honest with you, trying to approach an abuser like that, depending on their severity, unless you're a close friend and they trust you as a confidant and respect your opinion, more than likely they're not going to use any resource you give. It's more easier to try to get to the victim and say, hey, have you used some of these resources? Have you heard about this person's story? And they may be able to remove themselves out of the situation, and then the abuser could possibly get help elsewhere. But it's just really hard for people on the outside to try to approach an abuser, because most of the time they don't see that there's a problem.
Right.
And that's the problem. Until they get arrested or something like that, until they have something over their heads, like first time getting arrested or police showing up. A lot of my people, they're very, police officers or lawyers, judges, firefighters. I mean, they have all kind of doctors, all kind of careers that they're like, oh my God, I could lose everything if I don't fix these problems.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to see a lot more than likely. The abuser has to see a bigger picture of what they're facing against to want help. But yes, there are resources out there for an abuser called the BIP program.
Okay, Yvonne, you're saying
anger management. I want to be clear because some people send people to anger management.
Thank you.
It's not anger management. It has nothing to do with anger management.
Those are two different things. Thank you, Latasha. That's one of the things I wanted to just hit back on because there was some good combo. I didn't want to insert myself, but there was two things I just want to take us back real quick. So when we talk about abuse, I know we're heavily talking about physical and verbal abuse, but I want everyone out there to also know that the abuse comes in different forms. Economic abuse, like Roger mentioned, like finances. They have the strings, they have the purse strings. So you can't even leave. So I control you and everything you do based on money. I have control of the checkbook, the credit cards, and all the resources.
A housewife or something like that. Yep.
Exactly. Another thing is one of the things that we, especially in COVID, that may be amplified and you may not even realize it, is isolation. Because that's part of what some people do to get that individual under their control, because we talked about power. Some of this is power and control. It's isolation. They isolate the individual. And I had a friend, this happened to her, and I didn't realize it. We were young then. We were early teens, early 19, 20-ish, and I didn't realize this was happening until after the fact, right? Until we all find out, oh, he just wants to be with his family, or we don't want to go out with y'all, we're going to hang with his family, not knowing all this time when they were talking about his family, he was talking about him and his friend at his house, and he only wanted her to stay with him at all times, to isolate her, to then use forms of manipulation and verbal abuse and things like that to control her. And then eventually it evolved into physical aggression and then physical abuse. So keep an eye out for your friends, family, and your village, because sometimes this isolation that we have with COVID can amplify this thing even more. And then the other thing I want to touch upon too is that when we talk about, I really want to talk about this because I don't know how many men are going to watch this or how many men are on right now, but this thing with, and Latasha, you could probably speak more to this because you've had direct contact with these individuals, are the women that are abusing men. And for men to admit that a woman is physically assaulting him or verbally assaulting him or isolating him can do something to a man's ego. And many times they are silent victims in this. And it's not until they respond in kind with the same aggression or the same tactics that they've been abused with. And then we see things on the news. And so I want to make sure that it's clear that this doesn't just happen to women, this happens to men. And I've known of people that this has happened to. And these are people that you would least expect it, and they're in a position they don't know what to do because it's a thing of shame. For women, some of us have shame. But for a man, I'm not a man, so I can't speak from a man's perspective, but I've listened to a man and the shame that goes with that, but also the anger that's inside that person that may come out in a different type of way. And then we'll be here talking about it. So I encourage everyone just at a minimum to have a conversation. We ain't got but time, some of us. Who's supposed to go to work? You put on your shirt so you can get ready for work, but to at least open that conversation, even if it's with one or two people that you know.
Right. And we definitely have to, absolutely. I mean, I've been saying this, that we have to stop laughing at men. I mean, because people see stuff on social media. So when celebrity men, like when Bow Wow got, slapped with a lamp and he had like scars and whatever on his face, and all these people made memes and made fun of him and all these things. I mean, every time a man is being abused, people make a mockery or a joke about it. And we have to stop that. We have to, take it more serious and hold women accountable. I hold them accountable. If they come in my court, I don't care, man, woman, boy. You're gonna be held accountable. But I will say I have a harder time with my female offenders. They're really tough, and I think they come in too because I'm a woman. They feel like I'm gonna have their back, and I'm like, no, if you an abuser, we're gonna deal with this. You're gonna be accountable. We're gonna make some changes, or you're gonna lose your kids and everything else if you don't make these changes. So it's kind of like you have to be tough. I have to be tougher on the women, but I want them to know that it's not okay. I don't care if he cheated. I don't care if he lied. I don't care what there's no reason to be abusive to anybody, regardless of what happened. Because a lot of times men do the same thing. What, she cheated? I caught her talking to somebody. Okay, that's not a reason to be abusive.
And I mean, I don't know, Natasha, if you could expound on this, but usually in cases of domestic violence, people who are the aggressors or the culprits usually have encountered some form of abuse. I mean, I don't know for sure, but maybe some form of abuse earlier on in their life, from childhood or whatever the case may be, or may have suffered from it. For the women who are the aggressors or the culprits, what have you found to be, the source of their aggression and abuse?
More than likely, either their mother was abusive or their father. And so quite a few of them have mentioned that their father was abusive. So they feel like, I'm going to get you before you get me type of attitude. And so they are determined not to be, they see their mother as weak. And so they're determined not to be weak as their mother. And they kind of seek out a situation to where they're constantly in pulling up conflict and trying to, get that person before they feel like the person's going to get them. And so that's usually what I see in those cases. And then sometimes too, it's just, the same thing as with men, if they witness abuse. There are a couple of cases that my people have said that my mom and dad were perfect. I've never seen them have an argument, which that may be very well true. However, I still would wonder what kind of child, like when the mom was pregnant, how was that dynamic? How was that relationship? Because it just seems odd that you've seen a perfect relationship. You've never seen them argue. You've never seen, nobody raise their voice and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you're dragging your wife down the street. Like that doesn't add up to me.
And have you seen a disparity in how domestic violence cases are tried, in the court system, the judicial system, when women are the aggressors versus when men are the aggressors? Is there a huge disparity or difference in how those cases are turn out legally?
Sometimes, depending on. So let's say it depends on a lot of factors, especially when it's a woman. So they'll pull history. So if the police have been called multiple times and they can show if at one time that the man was the aggressor, then there goes the case. She could say, oh, well, she was just fighting back. And her lawyer can propose that, right? So that's one thing that they can kind of toss it all up, right? Versus if it was a man, they probably wouldn't even look at that. But then there's also factors of how long it's been going on. It really has to be almost like we call it a smoking gun for a woman to really get the same accountability punishment as a man. However, I will say in Tarrant County, we don't care. And that's because, I pushed and talked about these things, and that, we're taking a bigger stance on, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, you're going to be held accountable, and you're going to court just like we don't care. But we do have a lot of work to do globally, nationally and globally, to hold it equally. But a lot of men, they won't say anything. And it usually, what happens is a nosy neighbor called the police thinking that he was being abusive. And when the police show up, they see him, all cut up or whatever, and make the arrest of her. And that's how a lot of these cases are coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we kind of, there's so many angles to this conversation. And, we just...
We'll be here all night.
Yeah, we scratched the surface. Just a few things which I think, like my main takeaway from this conversation has been understanding that for a large part of it is cyclical, and what we have to do is focus on breaking these cycles and how we attack it holistically, from the school system from classes and what have you, to get to kind of raise awareness, and also doing things like we're doing here to have the conversation. And it's my hope that this conversation makes people think, evaluate, and just kind of explore this at a deeper issue, so at a deeper level. So Latasha, I wanted you've spoken about Cheryl's Voice and what you do. If you can just kind of speak specifically about the type of things that you do, how you can be reached, and how are you able to help people through their situation. So present that for the people so they can get in touch with you.
So I provide workshops and education anywhere, whether it's in juvenile detention. A lot of times I get booked for big conferences, or anywhere. So anybody can send me a message about that and I'll give the information about that. Cheryl's Voice, we also have what's called a bear drive. So one of the things when I was a kid, dealing with immediately after I lost my mom and dad, a social worker gave me a stuffed unicorn, and I still love unicorns to this day. And so I started a bear drive to give to children who are traumatized. So usually what happens is when police and social workers show up to a scene where there's a murder or a murder-suicide, they provide the kids with something. And so I collect bears. I send out a message to people asking them to donate bears, and we give those to the organizations that go out to those trauma calls, and so they'll have nice bears to give them. We also have a yearly walk. We partner with the Women's Center. They do the 5K every year, and that's one of the things that I do in honor of my mom. I'm not a fitness person at all, but in honor of her, once a year, I would go out there and do a 5K in honor of my mom. What else? That's pretty much, outside of education, and Amazon is one of our partners now. So because of COVID, I haven't been able to do a lot of workshops that are in person, but I'm trying to figure out a way that we can socially distance and I can give out a whole bunch of stuff to victims as well as educate them. It's kind of like people will come for free stuff, but they're gonna have to be educated at the same time. So I'm always trying to figure out ways. We're gonna have a block walk soon where people can come, and we're just gonna hit up areas, zip codes that are really at higher risk, and give them the little door hangers that have the number for domestic violence awareness. So it's just constant of trying to make people aware, whether it's on social media, whether it's in the community. That's really what I do. Cheryl's Voice, the website is www.Cheryl's, CHERYLS, voice, VOICE.org. On their website, there's my email and everything is on there, but I will give my email as well, which is Latasha, LATASHA, at Cheryl'sVoice.org.
And Cheryl she's excellent in getting back in touch with you. I'll say that from my experience, because I inboxed her out the blue. She didn't know who the hell I was, and she responded like within 10 seconds at most. So
I tried to. You actually caught me at some good times, because sometimes because he sent me a message. So Facebook, Cheryl's Voice. We have Facebook, Instagram. If you do send a message on Facebook, I kind of see those a little quicker. Emails do take me a little bit longer, but
10 seconds. That's the bar, everyone. If it's over 10 seconds, don't
tell everybody that you got lucky, okay? At least within 24 hours, I was fine. But you did. I don't know how you did it, Chris. You definitely. Every time you send me a message, I was so happy to have my phone in my hands. I don't know.
Yeah.
You got lucky.
Yeah, and also
it does take me a little longer.
Yeah, and to bring it back to where we started and kind of why we had this focus in this issue, bringing it back to Kristi, I wanted to end with Roger and Yvonne. What do you introduced us to Kristi? What do you want her legacy to be? going forward? We know she was tragically taken, but as in the case with Latasha, she took her pain and made, from that came purpose. So what do you want Kristi's legacy to be going forward?
Well, for me, she has a little son. His name is Mason. And Mason not only lost his father, but an amazing mother to the circumstance. So as a community, we all need to raise Mason. I didn't, unfortunately, if you guys, everybody out there watching, there's a GoFundMe page for Kristi and Mason. And if you just go to Kristi Payne or Mindy Collins Facebook page, you guys can, donate just funds to help with Mason and the situation that's going on. Also, Kristi loves sports, so me and Yvonne, we will be talking about some things that once we talk to Mr. Payne, which is our father, and her sister, to see if we can collaborate and do something on, the sports aspect, where we can honor Kristi. But that's just me talking right now. I haven't really gotten there. I have a minor conversation with her family, but right now they just kind of wanted time to kind of, take care of her enroll and just kind of be at peace. So that's why I didn't really want too much focus on this conversation, too much on it, because I didn't want to be, inconsiderate to their feelings, but at the same time, it's fresh, and I wanted people out there to be aware, because like I and many other people we didn't even know, what kind of person this guy was, and whether it was just a last minute, he got anger and he lost control, whatever, it's never right. And, but it happened, and this is the way God allowed it to happen, and the bigger thing is he has to live with this, and I have to be, one of the biggest things is I just meditated, and God told me, like, hey man, like, you know what, forgive, and it's hard to forgive knowing that, hey, it happened, but I have to be a bigger person and forgive and let God deal with him, not Roger deal with him, but let God deal with him.
Forgiveness is never about the other person. It's always about you.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
It took me a long time to figure that one out.
That's true, Jasmine. Yeah, so just in line with what Roger was saying, and her name is spelled with the K, it's Kristi, Payne, Payne. They had a goal of 10,000. We're right under $600 away from that goal. So anybody watching out there, if you can go on to GoFundMe, this will be, the family's asking in lieu of flowers that we contribute to this, because this fund will also be for her son. And as Roger mentioned, she was a close friend of ours, and for me, she was like a sister. And so one of the things that we plan on doing as part of Make a Mark, in conjunction with Roger and with confirmation from the family, is to hold some type of domestic violence awareness and get that ball rolling again, and partner with other organizations in our community. In honoring Kristi, Kristi's life will not be in vain. And she has touched so many more people than we could ever imagine. It's often said, I prefer to give people their flowers while they're here on earth with us. But at the same time, if Kristi's story can help one woman, one child, one man in our community, then we have helped entire families and entire villages heal, or hopefully be saved, so that the same tragedy won't repeat itself again. So with that being said, you'll hear more from us. We'll be back on this show again, and with the convo session, we'll be talking about this even further, and getting with more individuals in the community, and doing some of the things. Latasha, a lot of the things stuck with me in terms of the counseling piece, and just making awareness on what is domestic violence. So I know Kristi would want us to continue to live, have fun, and help others. Right. And so that's what we're gonna, and that's exactly what we're gonna do.
Absolutely. And both of you guys, y'all keep my information. If y'all need me to come and speak, I will do that for free. Just let me know. what you need. I will definitely use
Thank you.
my voice. Also, in talks with the family, her son, unfortunately, is going to have a hard time. However, with play therapy and continual therapy, love and care from family, I'm pretty sure he'll probably be with the grandparents, like I was. He has a chance. Boys, the reality is, are harder, especially losing a mother like that. So I'm just letting you guys be aware that he's gonna need that love. He's gonna need that support. He's gonna need that therapy poured into him, and he's gonna need to know that he can overcome this. He can do things to bring memory to his mom, and not funnel into hate. And so he has a journey, but it's possible. I'm a living witness.
Amen. Jasmine, some final thoughts. Put you on the spot. You want me to come back to you?
No, I got it.
Okay.
I'm ready tonight. I'm prepared.
Right.
This actually touched home for me on a lot of different things. One is, not every I'm sorry deserves an it's okay. And don't ever go back to what broke you.
Amen.
In my fine Nigerian accent, hey. No.
Yeah.
Jasmine, you are so right, because people always say sorry and they go back and do it again and they say sorry again, and people really take that to heart. They're thinking that sorry means something, but it really doesn't.
Right. You can't cover. You can't use words to cover ugly actions.
Yeah.
Oh, and Roger, before we go off, I wanted, because you said something that I wanted to say, because you mentioned that a lot of you guys had no clue of what kind of guy he was. The reality is, I know in my situation, nobody knew my father was abusive at all. My mom had called the police so many times, she'd never told anybody. Had my grandparents known, it would be a whole nother story. My granddad probably be in prison for something. But she never said anything, and then she hid the abuse. I suffered I had multiple surgeries by the time I was born, just from the abuse of my father. I had a broken hip at 6 months, and she lied and told everyone that I was sitting on the bed and I fell. And so, of course, they were kind of looking like, "Are you sure? Are you sure that's what happened?" And that's just what happens, and that's unfortunate. But she, Kristi, probably more than likely he just didn't wake up this one morning and say he was going to do this. He had been, making comments. He had been doing things that nobody knows. And it's just, unfortunate that it took this tragedy to have the conversation, which is why I do the education I do, because I want women to, victims, I will say victims because women and men, but I want victims to speak out and say, something's going on. Let your family know. A lot of times they don't want to say anything because they don't want anybody to get hurt. I know for my mom, she knows that my grandparents didn't play no games. And so she probably just didn't want to tell them and thought it was no big deal. She could handle it. And unfortunately, he took the ultimate way out.
Yeah.
And one last thing, I read an article one time about this guy who was getting beat by his wife, and the cops came and they laughed at him and left. And I just thought to myself, because it's very rare. She was beating him with the pan, with the pan and stuff like that. And dude called the cops. So it's we know the statistics is higher with women, but the 4% that are getting beat, and they're holding it in, and nobody, they're not saying nothing about it because it's embarrassing. So we have to change the mindset. We have to change the mindset of the people in our community out there. There's no way any guy should ever raise his hand or a gun at a woman. How can you? That's cowardly.
Tex.
Chris, one last thing. Sorry, Raj. One thing I forgot to mention is I wanted to give, since this is recorded too, the Houston Area Women's Center 24-hour hotline, 713-528-7273. And then the Fort Bend Women's Center is 281-342-4357 for anybody out there that needs that.
Okay. Text.
Most of the night I've been sitting back and I've been very quiet because I've been actually listening to everyone and basically getting an education. And it's a lot of self-reflection. And what I mean by that is when people are speaking and they're talking about a safe haven and their home not being a safe place, I can't fathom that because, you know, what we create for our kids and our family is, okay, this is the place, you know, where you're most comfortable, where you're most safe. And that's what you want to prepare for your kids. And to hear that, you know, there could be, you know, possibly situations where that's not the case, that's mind blowing to me. And what I basically want to concentrate on is basically checking myself and checking my friends and little things that we might say or do, you know, that could be taking a situation lightly, you know. And we mentioned things about like Megan Thee Stallion and making jokes about things like that. I'm guilty. I mean, I've done it, but again, I never took into account how serious, you know, the situation could be. So definitely great information, great education. I appreciate each and every one of y'all today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so, you know, for so I first would like to say thank you. Thank you for joining us on this program tonight. Latasha, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Roger and Yvonne, thank you for agreeing to come on and speak about your friend and her tragic passing will not be in vain. It will help somebody. This conversation has already helped somebody. We know that. We've all gotten, those of us on the show and those watching have gotten an education. This is not an area I'm familiar with. Similar to what, you know, Tex was saying. When I think of home, the home I grew up in, as well as the home that I build now, it is a safe haven, right? It's hard to hear that many people, home is a place they need to escape from. But you know, it's the education is important. You know, breaking these cycles. I think that's really what it comes down to. That's right. Probably the most important takeaway I've gotten from tonight. You know, people aren't born as domestic abusers. It's, you know, learn the behavior from what they see and how people resolve conflict, and then they carry it on into their relationships. And so breaking those cycles as early as possible in as many ways as possible. So I thank everyone for joining us on the show tonight, sharing your knowledge, sharing your expertise. Rest in peace, Kristi Payne. She has a wonderful son that we as a community, and I include me and everybody here, we are part of this community. Any way that you guys would like to honor her life and to help her son, count us in, whatever it may be, to whatever degree, we want to be a part of that. This is real life, and it's a real impact of a young boy who now does not have his mother and his father, and he will need the village. So thank everyone for joining us tonight. This, you know, it's broadcast live on Facebook. Our website is justreasoning.com. We will, you know, cut this up and edit it and have it broadcasted there and share it all over the place. So share it with, you know, with your community. It will help someone. It has already helped people tonight. So everyone, thank you for joining. Latasha.
Wait. For the live chat.
Are you about to sing?
Can you put in the GoFundMe?
Yes, that's what I was just about to ask.
Yes. So
copy and paste it. I had some people asking so they can make donations. Can you type it in the chat so I can?
Yeah. So what I will do on our page under this video, I will post a few links. I'll post the links to Cheryl's Facebook page. Not Cheryl. Latasha's. My sister's name is Cheryl, and every time I say Cheryl's. Well, anyway, to Latasha's Facebook page, as well as to the GoFundMe for Kristi and the other resources that Yvonne mentioned. We'll post that information there as well. So it can, you know, and you know, I haven't been following the feeds. So I don't know what questions and stuff came in, but we will post those resources there for everyone. All right. So thank you, everyone. I know it's kind of past people's bedtime now. Let's go watch the Rockets close out the series.
You know, y'all are very special because I'll be in the bed, child.
Jasmine already in the bed. All right. All right, people.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
So much.
One love.
Thank you again, guys.
Thank you.
Man.
Blessings. Good night.